let's look back 3 terms for a second. Do you remember your agenda? I'm sure you do. Your agenda as you began your first term as governor of the state.
Very well. Nobody else does, but I do. I remember my campaign. It was jobs and justice. And the truth is, if you look at the state of the state for this year, it was basically jobs and justice. And the reason is there were similar times, pretty much. In 1982, when I was running, we were in the midst of the Reagan recession. Things were down. 1983, my first year as governor, we had the largest potential deficit in our history up until then. And so what I said is you have to encourage business with tax cuts, and we have to fight crime because that was the beginning of crack. That was the beginning of the drug madness. And I said jobs and justice. Now we have the Bush recession. It's not fair to say it's Bush's or Reagan's, but that's what they were called. The Bush recession, which was the whole subject of the 1992 election. And so there was a similar approach in both cases. We had the recession in '82. We fought back. By the time '87 got here, I was the most popular governor in New York State history because we had come back from the recession and we're doing great. We're going to do the same thing after this recession, but we're a few years away.
When you were looking at this job with no experience,
right,
with a fresh pair of eyes, how do you compare what you've been able to achieve in that first year with what you thought you could achieve when you began the job?
Well, see, when I became governor, I knew a lot because I had been lieutenant governor for 4 years, and I had been secretary of state for 4 years, so I knew the state, and I knew pretty much what to expect. And I was very realistic about my expectations. I made one judgment that is critical in terms of how the administration will be perceived when I'm all through. If you want to be remembered for something in this business, because people have a bumper-sticker mentality, what you have to do is pick one thing and say it over and over. I'm the education governor, the education governor, the education governor. I'm the environment governor, the environment governor, the environment governor. I win wars, I win wars, I win wars. I decided that was no way to govern this complicated state, that I would do whatever I had to do, and that meant everything. I haven't left anything out. And we have had extraordinary accomplishments in every area. There's not an area you can mention where I can't point to something unusual, unique, maybe even historic. Not environment, not taxes, the lowest taxes in 30 years, not infrastructure, the biggest rebuilding program in the history of the state, not environment, the first environmental assistance fund, not safety on the roads, the safest roads 5 years in a row, not innovation, the first seatbelt law, the first acid rain law, the first ethics law. There is nothing you can mention. The court system. I appointed 11 judges to the Court of Appeals. I appointed the entire Court of Appeals. That's never before happened in history. I appointed the first 2 women, the first Latino, the first 2 blacks. It's now, even after the tragedy of losing a chief judge in a most unfortunate way, it's now regarded as a superb court, maybe the best in the country. So the general public doesn't know any of that. But I haven't been surprised in what we were able to do as compared to what I thought we were able to do. We did an awful lot, and that's what I expected, and that's what we've done. When I ran in 1982, you couldn't find 3 promises in what I said. Not 3 promises.
No promises.
I made a promise not to raise the taxes. I made a promise to try to put the first woman on the Court of Appeals. Some Republican found a press release issued in 1982 by my campaign office in late October that says, the governor says that if he does anything, it will be to reduce the rates of crime. And they said, see, he made a promise to reduce the rates of crime in '82.
You said, no, I didn't do anything.
I mean, beside the fact that that was ridiculous and shows you, you know, how hard up for arguments you can get when you think you're in an effort where you might lose. If you wanted to play it semantically, you'd have to read the language this way. Well, I said, even if they were my words, which they weren't, they were a press release in the middle of a campaign by the press office, but even if they were my words, say, if I do anything, it will be to reduce the rate. Not, I will reduce crime, it will be something to reduce. And I did plenty of things to reduce the rates of crime. And the rates of crime did go down. So, aside from those semantic quibbles, I didn't make a lot of promises. Other than I'm going to work very hard and do everything I can.
But you make them to yourself.
No, I make one promise to myself. that I'll quit when I don't believe it anymore. And before I quit or they beat me, I will work with every ounce of energy I have. Because if you can't give this job everything, then you ought to leave this job. This job requires that you give it everything you have. And I've been able to do that. I still can, even now after 11 years. I have more energy than most people, more strength, more good health than most people. And that's not something I'm accountable for. It's a gift. I have good health and good strength. I use it all up in this business. And that I promised myself. You've got to be able to do that. It's like a marriage. If you can't give it everything, you have to get out.
I keep coming back to the word, and you've used it before, this whole idea of service. And it seems to me that's almost your litmus test, is how can I be of service?
Well, that's, you know.
Explain service.
It wasn't always. I mean, people have different objectives at different stages in their lives, I think. I started very young. Matilda and I met very young. We were married while we were still in school. I had only one objective then. It was not public service. It was to take care of my family. We didn't have any money. We had a mattress in a furnished apartment. That's what we owned. I had 2 kids before I had a job. I was still in school. I had plenty of jobs, but until I was a professional, I had 2 kids already. Lived in a furnished apartment. I had one objective: take care of Matilda and the kids. Get out there and make enough money so that eventually they can get into a house, which we did a little Cape Cod. That's all I cared about. Work, 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 bring the money home, take care of the kids. And I did that reasonably well. After a while, as the kids grew up and we knew some success, we turned to public service as a volunteer. I represented people against Rockefeller, against Lindsay, against the United States of America, free. One group for 7 years, another group for 3 years, no fee. That was a form of public service. I could afford to do it because I was a practicing lawyer and having some success. And then eventually, Matilda and I and the family decided, let's go into public service. And now that's all there is public service. It's the most important thing to us. Otherwise, you know, I could have gotten out in 1990 when the trouble was really starting, after 2 successful years, record-breaking victories, 2 successful terms. My people said, let's get out, get a lot of money, you know, live like a lord, go to a Wall Street firm or do something else, write books, give speeches, make money. Ed Koch now tells me he's making $1.5 million a year or $1 million a year. But I think he misses the public service, and I think I would too.
Is your sense that the 4 years ahead are in some way easier than the 4 years we've just come through, economically?
The 4 years ahead will be easier than the last 3 years we've come, absolutely. They won't be as easy as 8 years ago, but they will be easier than the last 3 years. There will be gradual growth in the economy, not to the halcyon days you knew in 85, 86, 87, 88, but there will be gradual growth in the economy, and that's what gives you the relative ease.
When you look back on the last 3 terms, there must be disappointments, personal, professional, things you wanted to achieve, things that you came close to achieving. What are they?
Well, I didn't get the bias-related violence bill. You know, that's a law that says, hey, look, if you beat somebody up because he's a Jew, or she's an Italian, or she's a lesbian, or he's a gay or a black or a white, that's ridiculous. That's absurd, and that's dangerous to this democracy in a particular way. This democracy depends upon keeping diversity intact. When you start challenging diversity, when you say to be different is to be inferior, then you're challenging the main predicate of this democracy. We should have passed a law that says if you hurt somebody because she's an Asian, then you're going to pay a special price. Our legislature, our Senate would not do that. They're basically Republican, but they would not do it because they didn't want to give gays and lesbians that protection. That is wrong, and that's a big disappointment. Because, let's face it, the Senate and I and the Assembly, the Democrats in the Assembly, the Republicans in the Senate, agree about 900 times a year, and we do bills, about 900 bills a year. So there's not I'm not saying that I condemn them for all things, but this is a big disappointment. I gave up on funding my own good idea called Liberty Scholarships because we're in the middle of a recession. I regret that. I didn't travel enough in the earlier years. I should have gone more to Japan and Israel and France. I was being invited by countries all over the world, but you know, I thought it was better to stay at the desk and work here, and I saw everything as a boondoggle. That was very naive and unfortunate. I should have been out there doing business, you know, getting business. We did a lot of it in the last few years, but I should have done it sooner. Probably I should have been more active in the National Governors Association. You know, most of the governors are very unhappy that I haven't been active. I just didn't like going away for 3 days, 4 days at a time to a National Governors Association conference because I'm not built that way. That was a mistake. I should have gone. I should have spent more time with them, I think. So those are 4 regrets.
Someone told me you've only lived 2 places in your life. Is that true? Albany and Queens?
You mean my residence?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was born in South Jamaica, 9536 150th Street, and I live...
Went to St. John's.
I live now at 18817 Rio Drive. That's 188 to 150. That's 38 blocks. So go 9 blocks north, and that's really my mother's house, and we're looking for another house, but it'll be in Queens. Yeah, I'm born and raised in Queens. I've been all over the world, but I was born and raised in Queens, and I love it. And, you know, I stay there, and I'll probably die there, because I like the continuity of it. I like being reminded. The roots are significant to me. You know, the stretch is important to me, what you were, where you came from. I don't want to go to a place that's altogether different. Why should I? I want to remember my mother and father. I want to remember the shoes with the newspaper in them. I want to remember the junkyard and the war and collecting silver foil. I want to remember sitting on a milk box in my father's grocery store when milk came in crates and you covered it with ice so it wouldn't spoil, and it wasn't homogenized, so all the cream was at the top of the bottle, and listening to Joe DiMaggio with my ear to a little brown radio that was on the shelf because my father thought it was embarrassment for a baseball game to be playing in his ethnic grocery store. I want to remember all of that. It's important to me.
Let's talk about crime. I mean, the rumble out there is that that's going to be, for everyone, the election year issue. And that it's what's top on voters' minds, and it's got to be addressed, and guns maybe even as the first issue on the subset. You and Giuliani seem to be prepared to join forces on that issue. How will that work?
This is going to sound awful. I think most reasonable people agree more or less on what has to be done about guns and crime. Rudy Giuliani is a reasonable person, so am I. There are nuances of difference, but the basic propositions are all the same. And here's what they are in a nutshell. 1, the crime is always going to be with us, but it is at a grotesque level now. It's worse than it usually is. It seems to come in waves, and this wave is a terrible one. 2, government's first obligation is to keep you safe. If government can't do that, it can't do anything. So it's no surprise that everybody, all the politicians and all the people in government are talking about crime. They should. That is the first concern, to keep people safe. Number 3, the syndrome is really drugs, guns, violence. It's all one piece. You can't separate them. The violence is not separated from the guns. The guns is not separated from the drugs. So you have to deal with all 3.
Why isn't it poverty, drugs, guns, violence?
I didn't say poverty, drugs,
No,
guns.
I did.
Well, I think there is a relationship, and I'll get to that. But I want to talk specifically about poverty and what the relationship is and what it is not. So the syndrome is complicated. The solution must be complicated. That means this foolish argument, I call it in the State of the State, between those who say, let's emphasize law enforcement, that's the whole game, and others at the opposite extreme who say, no, it's all a matter of root causes. If you had more social, that's a foolish argument. The truth is, you need some tougher laws. You need better enforcement. You need drug treatment and drug education. So you need laws, law enforcement, drug education, plus you must deal with the underlying social problems, or you will have more crime. There's no question. So you must do it all. You can't pick one side that you prefer because you think 51% of the people like that side and say we'll do it all with a death penalty or we'll do it all with a housing program. Those are false polar extremes. You need tough laws, real enforcement. You need drug education. You need to stop people from taking drugs one way or another. And you need social programs in the sense that you give people the chance to work, a future, a hope, so that they're not misled into a life of crime. You have to do it all. Politicians don't want to admit you have to do it all because it's so expensive, it's so complicated, it's so difficult, so hard to communicate. But all reasonable people will agree on what I just said.
And yet I know that viewers who are sitting and watching this, while they agree with the idea of solving these problems, also have this sense in the pit of their stomach that we've been on this slide, that problems have been growing, they've been growing for a period of time, and that there isn't anything that's going to be done that's going to fundamentally change the direction we seem to be moving in. And that's terrifying.
Well, for those people, let's say two things. First of all, you're right, it's very bad, and here's what we ought to do. I said it earlier in this discussion with you. 3 strikes and you're in. Put these people who are incorrigible, violent felons away, life imprisonment without parole. Take the assault weapons away. Don't give as much parole as you're giving now. Be sure the system is effective. Be sure that a potential criminal knows there's a good chance he's going to get caught, convicted, and canned. All of that will help. I will also say this to you, that the truth is, and I know this is hard to accept, that for all the Colin Fergusons that you have occurring now, the crime rates, believe it or not, are down. That's no comfort. I understand that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't respond actively. But from an historic point of view, the rates are down. The panic and the urgency you hear now, you heard at the time of Berkowitz in 1977 when I was running against Koch. You hear it periodically. Let me give you this. I think it's 1838. I think it's 1838. Lincoln is 29 years old, and he gives a speech to the Lyceum, and he says, "The riotous conditions in this country threaten us with chaos. We must make the enforcement of the law the political religion of the nation." That's Lincoln.
It seems to me that one of the fundamental changes that we're faced with today is that the jobs that are available for young men and women seem in so many ways hopeless, retail, short, without a career curve.
Let's take that. Let's take that.
Not working
Let's
with your
stop
hands.
that. I think there are differences. This is not one of them. That's a lot of garbage. You know, in those days, my father was a ditch digger. There are people today who would say, I can't start with anything menial, I won't get to the top. He started with something menial. He raised a family, became a small businessman, did very well, thank you. I was a stock clerk. I was a laborer with a construction group. I worked in a department store. Believe it or not, don't tell anybody, I hope they don't see this film. I learned about ladies' lingerie from a woman who taught me cup sizes because I did inventory with brassieres in Gert's department store because that was a job, okay? There were, in the old days, there were menial jobs that you took because you needed a job. There are plenty of menial jobs that people could take now. The difference, they don't want to. Why? Values have changed dramatically. Television has had something to do with that. Electronic communication has had something to do with that. Affluence has had something to do with that. Mobility has had something to do with that. Social programs have had something to do with that. We did make life easier in many, many different ways. And then we got it all confused by making it harder than it's ever been by inventing crack, which is the big negative difference between this time and all previous times. There was no crack. There was no drug that addicts 1 out of 2 people when they try it for the first time and that makes you crazy the way crack does.
I want to get to crack because I think it's interesting and I want to talk further about it. But let's finish the job thing because I think that there's something maybe that we missed in all that. The woman that taught you how to be a stock clerk knew that you were not going to be a stock clerk for the rest of your life.
How did she know that?
You knew it.
I did not know it. I was a kid from South Jamaica. Nobody went to college in my family. Nobody went to college on the block. We had a block party for Anthony Boscano when he made the Department of Sanitation, because that was a civil service job. He was going to have a uniform. He was going to have a pension. He was going to have respect. We had a block party. People celebrated. Tony got a job with the civil service with the city of New York. If you could have become a cop, you would have been king of that community. We didn't know anything. We knew that you're supposed to take a job, you're supposed to work, you're supposed to do the right thing. Then if you get lucky, you get lucky. I got very, very lucky. That's all it was. But no, this notion that you knew someday you would be a governor.
No. Don't misunderstand me. I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, but then say it again.
It seems to me now that there's a disillusionment in the fact that there isn't any chance, that there is this dead end, and that the job at McDonald's behind the counter will lead to the job at McDonald's behind the counter. Now maybe that's not true.
It is not true.
But people don't believe that. Kids don't believe that.
Well, I'm not so sure of that. There were people when I was growing up who felt that they wouldn't be stock boys, and they certainly wouldn't be ditch diggers like Andrea. And some of them became bookmakers, and some of them became criminals, because that life was too hard for them. A ditch digger like Andrea, forget about it. I'm going to work for Tony, the bookmaker. And they became bookmakers. And they wound up in jail. And they wound up being shot, or they wound up being killed, or they wound up getting in trouble. That's always been true. There have always been people, two paths crossed in the woods, Robert Frost, and you have to choose which one you'll travel. That choice was available to us, and that choice is available to people now. The big complication in this time is drugs. The big difference in this time is crack. We didn't have anything like it. The worst you had in our community was marijuana. There was heroin in the world, but the poor people, because there was more poverty then than there is now, there was less wealth available, you couldn't buy heroin. It was just not real in our neighborhood. Marijuana was real. Reefers were real. Reefers are bad. I don't like reefers for kids especially, but reefers don't do to you what crack does to you.
I want to get to 3 or 4 important New York things, and I know that we're going to run out of time.
Here we go, short answers.
Yankees.
Stay.
What do we do to keep them?
New stadium.
How?
New stadium, fix up the Bronx, clean up the Bronx, they're going to stay.
In the Bronx or in Manhattan?
In Yankee Stadium, exactly where they are now. Clean up the place, fix up the stadium, new luxury boxes, new Metro North, maybe even a roof on the place. Abe Hirschfeld has a very good plan.
Giuliani. He's going to come to Albany, he's going to say, Governor, we need money for the city. What are you going to say?
You're right. Who's been the champion for the city for all these years? I'm glad to have you. Go talk to your Republican friends. They're the ones who say no.
Clinton. It's been in a year. There was a sense that it would do well for New York to have a Democrat in the White House, that he would bring home the bacon in some way or another. You endorsed him. Has he done that for us?
Not yet, but it's not his fault, I don't think. The budget has been very, very difficult. And I think he's trying, and I think there's a long way to go, and I'm sure he'll give us fairness in the long run. The biggest test is Medicaid now. We get 50.7% from the federal government for Medicaid. Other places get 82%. We're demanding, Senator Pat Moynihan and I are leading the charge, we're demanding more fairness. The president says he's going to take a look at that and see if he can give us a better formula. That will be a real big test of whether the president's able to help this state, and I think he will.
Gambling. NYRA, OTB, Lotto, states in gambling, and there seems to be problems with NYRA, there's problems with OTB. It's been an issue for you for a while. What are you going to do?
NYRA should buy OTB, should merge with OTB, make it one group, because NYRA has the product, the horse races. OTB is merchandising it. Put the merchandiser and the marketer in with the product maker, make it one company, NYRA. NYRA should buy OTB. They're working on that now, should absorb it, make it one unit. Privatize OTB.
You've talked about 3 strikes you're in.
Yes, sir.
Do we have the cells to do that? Are we going to build?
You have to provide them. I have built more cells than any governor in history.
And we're going to build some more.
Well, hey, if I've built more than any governor in history, I've proved I can do it when you have to do it, right?
This is a bit of a cynical question, but it's one that I know viewers think sometimes. Whether it's Joe in the Bronx or Ann who's in Schenectady, they sit and they watch and they say, will it really make a difference to me who has this office 4 years from now? Will it personally change the world around me in the short term?
All I can tell you is since I've been governor, the taxes have gone down, the education's gotten stronger. We built 13 centers for advanced technology. We brought the state back from a recession of 1983 to a high point of its history, and we're doing the same now with the recession of '89. It doesn't show yet, but it will 3 or 4 years from now, especially if I stick around. Can I say to people it'll make a difference? They have to make that judgment. I would think it makes a difference who your leaders are. If you get the wrong leader for a $60 billion state, the 10th largest economy in the world, one of the most complicated places in the world to govern and to lead, make the wrong judgment, maybe that can hurt you. If I'm the wrong leader, I can surely hurt you. No question about that. But I think the one thing that people have to know is you have to take this seriously. This is not a grocery store like Andrew Cuomo's little grocery store. It's not a mama and papa store. It's not a simple operation. It is the most complicated state in the Union, with the exception, I think, of California. It is the 10th largest economy in the world. You really do have to know what you're doing to do it.
Final question. The tone of this entire conversation has been extraordinarily pragmatic, and as you said, that's also part of the tone of the state of the state.
I'm a New Yorker.
But you're also, and I've seen you to be from time to time, a great dreamer. Close your eyes and see things ahead and aim for them. When you close your eyes, what are some of the dreams that you're setting out ahead of yourself?
For the place, really, not for me. I've had more dreams than I'm entitled to. I've had dreams fulfilled that I wasn't entitled to dream. For the place, drugs gone, peace, a generation of people who are not racist, who are not stupid about difference, who understand difference and appreciate it. A place where everybody has telecommunications capacity, where everybody can learn everything, even if they're in a wheelchair, because it comes on your screen, and because you can afford it even if you're broke. The government sees to that. A place where everybody can work at a job that's worthwhile and that will give them dignity and even fulfillment. Place where the air is clean, and most of all, a place where there's peace and ideas and discussion, and a place that protects itself from a great new threat, and that is isolation. Because now you can live all by yourself. You never have to leave your bedroom, even to work. Get interactive television. You can have a conference with anybody, a fax machine, a telephone. You never have to leave. Get a video cassette. You never have to go rub shoulders with the guy at the Loews Valencia. You never have to see anybody. You can hide the rest of your life and live like a monk. That would be awful.
It is the cutting edge danger of this new technology.
That would be awful. You got to go back into the streets, back into the parks. Get out there, argue with your neighbor. Go next, tell him he's making too much noise. Get to know him.
Thank you.
Okay.